Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Dr. Larry D. Snapp. And we're going to be discussing his amazing book that was co-written with his wife, Dr. Carol A. Snapp, called Blended Families. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a whole host of other places. But if you want to gather everything that Dr. Snapp has in store, people, check out his personal site, okay? It's called blendedfamiliesministry.org. There, you're going to find more information on him, more information on this amazing book filled with wonderful resources, as well as hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. So one more time, that's blendedfamiliesministry.org. And before we go any further, I want to quickly take this opportunity and point out the fact that Dr. Snapp was brought to our network by one of the best publishing firms in the business. People you already know, I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So if you're a writer out there who's gone through their process and now you need help moving the book you just developed, look no further than ARP because this is exactly what they specialize in. Now you're going to want to head on over to authorreputationpress.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is a true pleasure to have Dr. Snapp here on the line. Now, no pun intended, but this book is a snapshot into not only his marriage, but also their, again, no pun intended, the blended families that him and his wife brought together. Now, not only are we going to see how their lives played out, some of the obstacles that they had to contend with, but it is a remarkable resource that is going to offer valuable information, advice, education, and so much information with questions at the end of each chapter so you and your blended family can assess as you go. I'm telling you, people, this is a workbook. This is a guide. This is a wonderful resource to add to your shelf. By the time we've concluded, you're going to run and purchase your copies because you're going to realize, this is a book that you want to add to your shelf. And at the end of the day, Dr. Snapp is the expert, man. So sit back, strap in, and let's go. Dr. Snapp, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for this opportunity to be with you.
Of course. Hey, listen, man, we're looking forward to the information here. I think let's just call a spade a spade. With the divorce rate as high as it is in this country primarily, but I'm sure in the world, blended families like you're talking about here in the book is probably more common than ever before. So this is Absolutely. A topic of conversation that I think a lot of people can resonate with. And a lot of people are probably yearning for that assistance on how to make everything fit nice and neatly together.
Right.
Before we jump into this book, Dr. Snapp, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Okay. Thanks, Benji. Well, I met my wife in 1979. I was husband number 3 for her, my first marriage, and it just recently ended at 44 plus years. So we kind of figured some things out along the way. But I inherited 2 teenagers and a 4-year-old back then. And, it was nothing that made logical sense. We met at a disco. Right, it was 1979. It was disco days. But, she's spilled her guts right off the bat, and I should have just run away. But there was just something about her spirit that, and the exterior package was pretty nice too, but, there was just something about her heart, her spirit, the love for her kids and everything else that just was extremely attractive. And 6 months later, we got married. And we did 23 years of marriage without really doing any kind of spiritual anything. And then things actually kind of blew up at that point. Then we got help that was Christian based, and it made a huge difference in our lives. We became Christians, and we actually, after about 6 months, we started volunteering with that ministry to do marriage counseling. And we did that for like 5.5 years with those guys. And then we started our own blended families ministry after that, because we were a blended family. And what we were discovered over those few years was patterns of errors. Now, like you were kind of saying, that blended families, the divorces and remarriage after divorce and all that kind of stuff is 60 or so percent of even the church these days. It's more normal than the exception anymore. So after several years of counseling, all these people on their second or third marriage trying to figure out how to do it, we realized that we're like 2 or 3 generations into when, most of the marriages were like broken families and that kind of stuff. The intact traditional family just didn't exist anymore. So nobody knows how to do marriage. They've all learned how not to do it. And so we put together this class, this curriculum, the workbook for basically post-marital blended families. We also have one for premarital and one that we call Beyond Divorce that will be out before too long. But this was the first one. It was the post-marital, and we developed it as a class that we could teach and then teach others to teach by going through multiple times, right? And multiply ourselves that way. So it was basically a 12-week class. We went through what is a marriage, what's a blended family, how to communicate, how to do stepkids, get all the relationships in your life in the proper biblical order. Basically, God's first, spouses are next, parent-child is next, in-laws, outlaws is after that, jobs, and if you do a ministry, that's at the bottom of the pyramid that we have. And people just had things out of order. The biggest thing in a blended situation was in the parenting end of things.
Yeah.
You're a single parent for a while, you're the boss. And you call the shots, and you don't need anybody's permission. And then you meet somebody, you get married, and now all of a sudden, like if you're the single mom, or single dad too, but mostly the single mom, now you have to come in under someone else's authority. And the thing that we really noticed the most here was because of being a single parent, and it's typical of human nature anyway, but you tend to feel like you own your kids.
Right.
They're your kids. But because this was a biblical teaching, we realized that, the kids are gifts from God. They're his kids, and you're the steward of his kids. And so if you're just the steward, then it shouldn't matter where they came from, right? And that's where people would get really things messed up. And, you get married, and one parent would say, well, I don't like how you're treating my kids. And, then the kids are higher. The kids are too high on the pyramid. And it's like the kids, your kids, are higher than your spouse now. And that's totally not right. So we just put this curriculum together. We saw the patterns that everybody had. We've had people that came to us for counseling. We're just overwhelmed. We got 85 different problems. And after spending a couple hours with them, it's like, no, you got 3. And then it was like, oh, well, we can handle 3. We just couldn't handle 85. So, it was a matter of educating the people through the counseling. We got a lot of the people in the class from the counseling because we just made it part of their homework. It was almost mandatory, as close to mandatory as we could make it anyway.
Well, listen, I love what you're saying here because there's so much relatability. And this is why I'm telling you, people, you got to pick up your copies because chances are you yourself either come from a blended family or are embarking upon that merger yourself.
Right.
So this is something that touches on so many people. So the information is incredibly valuable. Now, you've already started to highlight certain things. I love the ownership conversation, right? Because I think that one is huge, right? Like I get it. As a single parent, you get so accustomed in a certain particular lifestyle that when you add someone else in, there is still that hierarchy, right? And you have that challenge of releasing the reins, I guess, for lack of a better term, in that,
right.
and balancing it. So building off of that, let's tackle another tip, and what are some key habits or practices that you recommend for fostering trust and communication in this type of marriage and blended family scenario?
Okay. Well, as far as communication goes, obviously we would have people sign a consent form when they come in for counseling, and we always threaten to just put communication on there as number one issue. It's just part of the form.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's everybody's problem. But I was talking to somebody earlier today about that, and we had an older couple in the class, and then they started teaching it for a while. But she was from Italy, he was from here, and so English was her second language. Now, even here in the U.S., we got all different kind of cultures. Everybody's from somewhere else, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm here in Arizona, and so, there's tons of Spanish speakers and all kind of stuff. But when English is not your first language, like this lady, she would think, and her thoughts would be in Italian. Mm-hmm. Now, she had to communicate what her thought was in English. So obviously there was some issues, and her husband was like, I don't think that's what you really meant to say, right? So they developed this little system where they finally came to this agreement or this idea that when she would say something where she had to translate it in her head, that he would repeat what he heard and then ask her if that's what she meant. And there's so many good things that happen when you do that. It clarifies the message, for one thing, but the speaker gets to save face if it wasn't quite the right message. It's not, oh, you're such an idiot for saying it that way.
Right.
That doesn't help at all. So, like, she says something, and he's like, okay, here's what I heard. Is that what you said? And is that what you meant? Mm-hmm. Like, here's how I understood it. Is that what you were trying to say? And if it wasn't, then she would like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me try again. And no hurt feelings or anything.
Yeah.
So it's when you really clarify the message, and you have to kind of go back and forth maybe a couple of times, but it takes patience. Of course, a lot of people don't have that. They just and another thing on the communication, a lot of people only listen to see when you stop talking.
Right.
Because they're waiting to say whatever's in their head. And so, part of this system that these guys had was that I'm trying to listen to understand, not just wait till you're done. Right? Mm-hmm. So you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be listening twice as much as talking. But yeah, communication is like the key to everything. If you can actually get your message across in an understandable way, and sometimes it takes a couple of tries, then you're way far ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. Listen, Dr. Snapp, I love that you said that. And here's the thing, that you brought it up in a very specific example in terms of a couple, one whose native language was not English and one who is. I'll tell you one thing, man, that is a practice that my wife and I utilize, and we're both English speakers. I mean, my wife, she's Mexican and her native language, of course, is Spanish. But
right.
she, we talk to each other in English all the time. But that is a great practice, I think, for couples to just adapt. Because so often, like you said, and this is why I was laughing, like it's not a laughing matter, but I'm laughing because it's relatable. So often, when you're in a heated discussion, man, there's some times where I'm not listening to what you're saying per se. I'm waiting for you to stop because I got something I'm about to drop on you. And I got something I'm about to say, and it's gonna sway things. And
sure.
We've been together long enough where I understand this is not a battle. This is not what we're trying to accomplish. And obviously that's not going to get us to our end goal. But, we've all been there. And that is a great, great practice to implement.
Well, one of those things in the communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, so I'm a biblical teacher, so everything I see is like spiritual warfare, right? And one of the nuggets that I got in one of my first counseling sessions is being on the counselee side was that marriage is spiritual warfare and your spouse is not your enemy.
Yeah.
And that saved everything. Because, man, the spiritual warfare, the attacks that came, it sure looked like my wife was the enemy to me. So, it's when you understand the warfare part of it and who the real enemy is, now you can be the one flesh that you're supposed to be and come together and fight as a team rather than just being opposite teammates,
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that. And, Satan's always trying to screw up all the communication anyway. So when you realize that's kind of how it works and you can catch it early enough before things get too heated, there's a lot of power in that.
There you have it. As we transition here, so we talked about advice for the parents, right? For the partners in this situation. But one thing that cannot be overlooked, of course, are the children and their involvement in all of this. So I do think we would be remiss in not addressing that. So let's tackle that next. What advice do you have for helping children adjust to the new family dynamics after this merger?
Right. Well, that's a huge deal. The kids are often the collateral damage. It's the adults that cause the problem, but the kids pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a conference one time for blended families, and it was very eye-opening. There was like a couple hundred people there. They broke everybody up into like 8 to 10 people, little groups, and assigned little tasks for certain people in the group. And then after a few minutes, people were coming around, okay, you go to that group, you go to that one, and you over there. And they just started shuffling everybody around. And it was kind of like what happens when a family breaks up and then they get a new family, right? Well, all of a sudden you have like the oldest child in this family is now not the oldest in the next one. And that hierarchy that the kids are used to gets all jumbled up. So there's, jealousies and all kind of stuff that happens in the blended. So that's why we really keep going back to that pyramid structure, that when a couple gets married, they really need to focus on putting the marriage, that relationship, above the kids. So that's why date nights are important. Get a babysitter, leave the kids at home once in a while. So they see, and you're being the example of a good marriage to them so that they can duplicate it later. But if you keep putting your kids higher than your spouse and that kind of stuff, then that's kind of what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we're trying to teach in the class is to get the people to realize how important it is to get the different relationships in the right order so that the kids have a whole lot less chaos and stress going on in their life. And when I was actually working as a computer programmer one time, this one lady came over and she was divorced, but she was talking to me about how she was dropping the kids off at the dad's house And it just really hit me that it wasn't it when I grew up, where I lived was my house, right? That was my house. I didn't call it my mom's house, my dad's house, or anything. It was my house because I lived there. But when I started hearing things like, yeah, I dropped the kids off at dad's house, or the kid says to mom, oh, hey, mom, I left my backpack at dad's house, it really kind of hit me that the children kind of lose their identity somewhat in that they don't have a house anymore. That it's either I'm at dad's house or I'm at mom's house. And it really hit me that, that's one of those collateral damage kind of things that happens with a divorce is, the kids kind of lose their identity a little bit, or some lose it a lot in just little things like that. So, yeah. And we noticed that basically kids that are, say, 10 years old and less tend to blend easier than teenagers. Teenagers are like, oh man, I only got 3 more years, I get out of here, and they're not that interested in blending. You start hearing, you're not my mom, you're not my dad, you can't tell me what to do, and that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more challenging when the kids are a little older, definitely. But yeah, I mean, the kids really are the ones that end up paying for it. And a lot of times, unfortunately, there's certain exes that tend to be rather vindictive, and a lot of times they'll use the kids as weapons against the other spouse. So yeah, it's and there's 3 chapters in the book about the step children, the step parenting kind of stuff. So I mean, 3 out of 12 are strictly for the step parenting kind of things.
Listen, people, I'm telling you, this is a wonderfully informative book with so much for you to take in. The conversation has just started, but I promise you, we barely scratched the surface. There is a lot more still to be had. You know where you got to go to pick up your copies. As we close out of here, Dr. Snapp, we've discussed a lot of information, but is there anything else you'd like to leave our listening audience with before I let you go?
Well, again, this was a class. It was designed to educate people on how to actually make a successful blended family. And we understood going in that most people never saw how a good marriage looked like, right? They came from a blended, or they came from broken homes or whatever. And for the most part, they weren't that great. And so where are they going to learn how to do this? We just, our pastor at our church always had this thing about, find a need and fill it. And so that was kind of our inspiration to put a class together to try to educate people on just basic marriage stuff, really, but from a godly perspective, biblical marriage. There's tons of scriptures in the book. So there's a lot of scripture, and then there's the teaching on how to apply the scripture to your life. And I think that's the big part, is here's what the Bible says, but then here's how you can apply it. Kind of a easy to read. It's not real difficult. I mean, some of the scriptures are the old King James, so those are kind of hard to read sometimes. But, it's very straightforward. It's the stuff you need to know, and it's presented in a way that's pretty easy to grab.
I love this. People, listen, I'm telling you, this is something that I know we're talking specifically from a perspective of a blended family. But as I mentioned earlier, there's information found here that is for everyone, regardless of whether or not you're navigating the turbulent waters of blending 2 families together, or if you and your partner are just wanting to navigate through the relationship. There is helpful advice for every single one of us, and there are things that can be manipulated and translated to fit your situation. So again, it starts with this amazing book. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a whole host of other places, but make sure to check out the personal site, blendedfamiliesministry.org. and pick up your copies, because I'm telling you, this is one you need to add to your shelf. Get the conversation started, and let's start to do better. Dr. Snapp, this has been an absolute pleasure, a wonderful opportunity for us. I really do mean that. Thank you for the wonderful words of wisdom you've been able to relay. Thank you for writing the book, but most importantly, thank you for being here with us to discuss it through people of distinction.
Well, I totally appreciate the opportunity. I love talking about it.